Hey there, you rates, Mr. Herman here, and this is exercise 5D, multiplying and dividing terms. Learning goals for this lesson is to understand the meaning of what x to the power of 2 and what x to the power of 3 is, and to be able to multiply terms and simplify the results, and to be able to divide terms and simplify the results is the success criteria for this lesson. Now, multiplying and dividing terms was a topic that you saw within class, but it was done with a substitute teacher. Now, I'm not too sure how much of this content you covered, and based on the feedback that I got within class, it seems like as though this was a topic that you guys still struggled with. So just to cover my end, I want to make sure that we go through exercise 5D, just so you get a better grasp of it, and then you can attempt the questions that are provided within the textbook. So before we get into the different examples, we want to just make sure that we understand the notion of multiplying terms. In other words, if I were to get an example that looks like this, 4ab times 3c, how we would go about this to tidy this up or evaluate it or simplify it or multiply it, or whatever word that they use within the question, it works in two different parts. The first part is we look at the numbers that are provided within here, and provided that every single number here is being multiplied all together, we take these two into consideration. So 4ab times 3c just means 4 times a times b, because remember there are invisible times in between the numbers and the letters, and we're multiplying this by 3 and c. This is all being multiplied out. This is called the expanded version of this here. And what we can do is we can just gather up the numbers, which can be here, so 4 times 3, and the letters A, B, C, which we can see here. 4 times 3 gives us 12, and A, B, and C are just letters, and they all get stuck back together afterwards. So 4AB times 3C is just equal to 12ABC. And all we've simply done is just multiply the numbers and gather the letters. So multiplying terms is probably the easiest tool to apply, because you're just gathering numbers and letters. Where it gets a bit tricky is if we have a question, and I should write this out in proper format, and we have terms that are dividing with each other. So 12AB all over 9AD. So a question will look like this, and it's going to ask you to simplify this. And again, we just break this into two parts, but because we're dividing, there are different rules that get applied. The first one is we're going to look at this 12 over 9. This 12 over 9 can be simplified down to a fraction 3 over 4, because the highest common number or factor within here is 3. 3 goes into 12 4 times, and 3 goes into 9 3 times. And even though it looks like a improper fraction, you just keep it in that format, because there's still more that we have to apply to it afterwards. Now, if you struggle with the number component, you can always use your calculator to simplify fractions. Put the fraction number in, 12 over 9, or whatever type you get. Press equals, and it will show the simplified version of 4 over 3. It might show 1.333. If that's the case, just press the SD button, which is located here, and you can go back and forth between the two. So 4 over 3 is the number component, and you can see here within the solution is 4 over 3. But the letter components, there's a rule that specifies that if you see a letter that's all being multiplied on the top and all being multiplied on the bottom, if this letter or any letter appears within the top and it also appears on the bottom, they get what's called cancelled out. And that's why we can see these two lines through the A's. And the reason why this is just because A divided by A is equal to 1. Okay, so they don't necessarily disappear, they get turned into ones, but when you have ones within an expression like this, you don't really implement it in, okay? Or it's just saying what's 4 times 1, well that's just 4, so we can just leave it as 4, or what's 3 times 1. So this A over A is equal to 1. This is just saying because any number divided by itself will always be 1. 2 divided by 2, 9 divided by 9, 1000 divided by 1000. A will be the number. It can take on any number. When you divide it by A, it will just be 1. Or whatever letter that you get, okay? But the main thing that you want to take away from this is that if I see this type of thing, when expanded out, they get cancelled out, and what you're left with are the letters that don't get cancelled out. You're left with a B, and you're left with just the letter D, which is B on the top and D on the bottom. So what you get all up is 4B. Remember that 4 over 3, so that's 4B over 3D. Dividing terms are a bit tricky. If you write it in the expanded version first, and then break it up into 2 different parts, you should be able to tackle the questions no problem whatsoever. So some key ideas. Just remember that this here is the expression, where this here is the expanded version. You'll be doing some expanded versions of whatever you get just to make it easier to read, but over time this won't be necessary. When dividing terms, it's probably in your best interest to do that, but multiplying terms, you will get the hang of it, and you can just jump from this straight to this. When multiplying, the order is not important. So multiplying 2 times A times 4 times B is also the same as 2 times 4 times A times B. You will always result with the same answer, it doesn't matter. But when you tie it up, the number always goes in the front, and then the letters just tag along. And the order of the letters, it doesn't necessarily matter. So this 2 times 4 times A times B, this can equal 8, because 2 times 4 is 8 AB, or it can equal 8BA, doesn't matter. X squared just means x times x, and x cubed just means x times x times x. The number dictates how many times you're multiplying the base or the letter, how many times you're multiplying it. When dividing, you just cancel out any common factors, which we did here, and you can use your calculator for that. And then if you see any letters that are the same, they turn into 1s, or they just get cancelled out. So in this case here, 15xy over 20yz, all these little lines are just indicating that they can be simplified further down to 3x over 4z. We'll tackle some examples so you get a better intuitive feel of what's going on. First example here, we're going to simplify 7a times 2bc times 3d. So the first thing we want to do is we want to write this out in expanded version. So it's 7 times a times 2 times b times c times 3 times d. And we want to make sure that all being multiplied, there's no just pesky pluses or minuses within there. They all have to be multiplied. The second thing is we're going to gather the numbers at the front. So 7 times 2 times 3. And this is going to be multiplied with whatever letters that are tagging along at the end. A times B times C times D. 7 times 3, or 7 times 2, sorry, is 14. And then 14 times 3. What's going on? A little navigation bar. 7 times 2 is 14, and then 14 times 3 is 42. So we have 42 as a number component. And remember, you can work this any way. You can do 3 times 2 first, which is 6, and do 6 times 7, which is also 42. Or you can do 7 times 3 first, which is 21, and then do 21 times 2, which is 42. You end up getting the same answer no matter what order you put it in. And what letters we have left get put all together, and you just pretty much ignore the multiplication sign, or you don't write it within the next part for the answer. So there's our final solution for simplifying this. Second one, same concept. This is A and there's B. 3xy times 5xz. So let's write this as the expanded version. 3 times x times y times 5 times x times z. Let's gather the numbers. 3 times 5 at the front times x times y times x times z. 3 times 5 is 15. How many x's do we have? 2 of them. So this is written as x squared. We only got one y, so it's just a y, and one z, which is a z, and that's our final solution. So even though this can be considered quite intimidating when you look at something like this, we're just writing one way to another. Okay, gather your numbers and multiply them. Whatever letters, just tag along at the end. Now we're going to get into tricky territory. We're going to look into division type questions. So for C, we have to simplify 10AB over 15B's BC. So 10 times A times B all over 15 times B times C. Now the highest common factor between 10 and 15 is 5. So right now, at this point within year 8, you should be used to knowing common factors between numbers without relying on the calculator. How many 5s go into the number 10 is 2. And how many 5s go into the number 15 is 3. Okay, so that's the number component to it. Now we're just going to see if there are any letters that are similar on the top and on the bottom. We have a B with a B. And so in this case, what we're left with is just A by itself. So we have a 2A. And we're left with a C by itself. So we have 3C. And this is our final solution here. It can't be simplified any further down. For D, we're going to be looking at 18 times x times y, because remember x squared is just the same as x times x, and this is all over 8 times x times z. All right, the number components, the highest common factor between 18 and 8 is only 2. It's only 2. So 2 goes into 18 9 times, and 2 goes into 8 4 times. So 9 over 4 is the fraction. If it's an improper fraction, you just still leave it as is. It doesn't matter. Now we can see for every x we see in the bottom or y on the top, we cancel it out with the bottom. So we have an x and an x. Now we still have this x remaining here. We just don't go ahead and cancel both of these x's with just one of them. It's 1 for 1. Wherever 1 we see on the top, we see 1 on the bottom. We cancel it out. So in this case, we're left with an xy on the top, and we're just left with z on the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to do one more tricky example, just so you get a better feel for canceling out a division type expression. So this is one last example that I want to look into, and there's going to be quite a few things going on here. Okay? First thing is always easiest thing is to expand this out. So this is equal to 8 times x times x times x. There's 3 lots of them. And there's 2 lots of y's, so that's y times y. And this is all over 4 times x times times y times this random t that I've just put in there, t for tats. Now let's look at the number components first. The highest common factor between 8 and 4 is actually 4 itself. So 4 goes into 8 twice. And 4 goes into 4 once. Now, if it's a 1, don't put anything down there. Okay, if it's over 1 or if it's under 1, when you simplify a fraction down to a 1, you don't write anything there. Okay, so you just leave 2 on the top. We'll still put the fraction line there. Now let's cancel each letter 1 for 1. I see an x and I see an x. And what you haven't seen in the previous examples is that we've now got another cancellation we can do for another x with another x. We keep doing this 1 for 1 until we've run out of ways that we can cancel out. And here we have y's, so 1 y for 1, and that's all I can cancel out. So what I'll be left with, I think I got a bit courageous here and left this line a bit too big. What we'll be left with is a 2x. I might go back to, here we go, 2xy up on the top, and 4t. Remember that 4 got cancelled out to 1, so it's just 1t, but we don't write the 1, so we just leave it as t. And that will be the final solution. So go ahead and attempt the questions from the textbook. So remember, the textbook can be found within the Compass Resources tab. You can see the Chapter 5 Algebra textbook. This right here, multiplying and dividing terms, is page 303. And the questions that you'll need to be doing, which you can see within the weekly planner, which is in Compass as well, is only questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. With questions 1, you're doing left-hand side. Question 2, you're doing 2 left-hand columns. Question 3, you're doing 2 left-hand columns. And question 4, you're doing the 2 left-hand columns. So you've got this lesson to complete this. Be careful with some of these questions here. You've got some negatives as well. So when you do a negative times a positive, it will result in a negative number. So this here would be negative 10x y squared z. Remember y squared because there's 2 y's. Be careful with your negatives. If you see 2 negatives multiplied together, it will give you a positive. So in this case here, even though you don't have to do it, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6. So you have 6xz squared. Alright guys, go ahead and attempt these questions. Best of luck. Ask me any questions if you need any help. Please ensure you watch this video first, and I'll see you in the next video guys.